Good afternoon, Year 5, and welcome to today's English lesson. So just as usual, please write today's subject, which is English, today's LO, to create your own verse, and then today's date, which is Tuesday, the 26th of January. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, obviously, is writing your own verse of the poem, The Highwayman. But just before we do that, I'm going to quickly run through the poem again, so you can feel free to pause the video if you want to have a look at any particular verses in the poem to help you create your own later. So I'll quickly run through the poem now, and then I will help you out with what your task is going to be. Okay, so you should have now completed looked at that, and now what I want you to do is just have a little think to yourself, what happens at the end of the poem? Feel free to go back and have a look, but what happens at the end of the poem? Okay, so you should know, of course, it is when they go to the Highwayman and Bess meet again. Okay, so they might both be dead as characters, but they still meet again in the form of ghosts. So we know that they're ghosts, but they're still characters. They can still be involved in another verse of the poem. So what do you think could, or what do you think might happen next in the poem? So what I want you to do in your English books now, or in your books now, is to just write a line or two, a sentence or two, just saying what you think could happen next in the poem. If there were going to be another verse or another 2 or 3 verses, what do you think could happen next? So just write that down for me. Pause the video. Okay, so I'm sure you've come up with some great ideas. We'll have a little listen to them later because I'd love to hear them. And what you're going to be doing now is actually creating your own verse, as I mentioned earlier. So I've just taken this verse here, the final verse of the poem, just as an example, because you are going to be following on from this verse in the poem. Okay, you're going to be adding another verse that adds on to the end of this verse here. So obviously we've discussed what happens at the end of the poem, which we know that the Highwayman and Bess meet again together as ghosts. You've had a little think to yourselves already and written some notes down about what you think could happen next in the poem. So now what we're going to do is just have a look at this verse in particular. Now, all the verse have the same kind of structure and same rhythm, same kind of rhyme. Okay, but I've just taken this verse as an example. So what I want you to do is just look at this verse and just have a think about which words in there rhyme, if there are any words that are repeated, maybe have a look at the punctuation. If you want, run through the rest of the poem as well and have a look what the similarities are in each verse. What is always the same? Okay, so what do you notice about the verse in the poem? So that's what I want you to do now for me. Okay, so you should have had a little look about that and had a little think about what you notice about the poem, what you notice about that verse at least, okay? And you should have maybe jotted down a few ideas of what you think about that. So what I've written down a couple of things here. So what I've noticed is that the first and second lines rhyme. Okay, so every single verse in the poem, the first line and the second line always rhyme. So what I mean by that is that the final 2 words, if I just show you on this verse here, yard and bard, they rhyme, okay? If we go back to another verse in the poem, so let's have a look at this one. We've got sky, high, trees, seas, okay? So all of the first lines and second lines in the verse rhyme. So you've got to make sure yours does that too. Okay, the third and sixth lines, they also rhyme as well. So we can have a look at that here. So there, hair, those 2 rhyme. Okay, and then we've got the fourth lines and fifth lines are shorter and always end in the same words. So for example, we've got, but the landlord's black-eyed daughter, Bess the landlord's daughter. Okay, so we've got that there. Ending in the same line, in the same word, and then much shorter lines compared to the rest of them. And then finally, what I've put here is at the punctuation at the end of each line. Usually it'd be just a comma, okay? And I know you can have a look at this example and you see that there isn't a piece of punctuation there at the end. However, I think that's a little bit of a typo because there should always be a piece of punctuation at the end of the line. As you can see on every other line, that is the case. So you use semicolons, commas, end of the verse, it'll always be a full stop, okay? But you're usually just going to use commas. So when you're creating your own verse then, what I want you to do is add this verse will be added on to the end of the original poem. So after that 11th verse and the second part of the poem, your verse will then come after that. Okay, so have a little think. You had a little think about earlier about what you think could happen next, what you think might happen next. So use those ideas to then include into your own verse in the poem. So it must follow the patterns included in the rest of the poem. So what I mean by that is simply it must include all of these things. The first and second lines must rhyme. The third and sixth lines must rhyme. The fourth and fifth lines must be shorter, but always end in those same words. So it must be the same word for the end of the fifth and sixth line, or fourth and fifth line, sorry. And then, of course, punctuation at the end of each line. So that must all be in your own verse. This verse must be about a ghostly meeting between the highwayman and Bess. Okay, so it must happen after the poem, like I've said. It's going to be added on to the end of it, and it must be about a meeting between the two of them and what they maybe got up together. You know, maybe they had a little talk about how angry they were at Tim or the king. They might just want to, you know, enjoy themselves a bit, live a little. Okay. So loads of different options of what you can write about there. Be creative and imaginative. Use your own ideas. And of course, I want you to include a really good range of vocabulary, guys, and try and add some character feeling in. Okay, we've been focusing a lot about the character feeling and how the different characters have been feeling throughout the poem. So try and add some feeling about how you add that into your verse. You know, describe a little bit about how maybe you think a certain character might be feeling, if you can try and add that in. And then this verse that you've created will be performed later in our live lesson. I want to hear it. I want all your classmates to hear it. It'll be great. So feel free to practice, rehearse. You know, you can make up your own actions again if you like. That's entirely up to you. I don't mind. But all you got to do then, basically, guys, is create a verse of your own. So 6 lines. It's got to have some rhyming in there. Okay, make sure you rhyme the correct words. This will be on this slide. Use this slide to help you. And yeah, I want to hear some really good ideas, guys. Okay, so that is your task today. We'll hear hopefully your own verses in the lesson later, and I shall see you later on. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, Year 5.